The Alien War Council smelled of iron and ozone. Their chamber, carved from the bones of an asteroid, vibrated faintly with the power of the fleet engines outside. 12 commanders sat in a half-circle, their scaled and armored bodies shifting with faint irritation as the intelligence chief delivered his report. "Humans," he said, his mandibles clicking in contempt. "A resource-poor species. Disorganized. Primitive. Their weapons are relics. Their governments fractured. Their culture centers on distractions, not war. They are no threat." Laughter rolled around the chamber. One commander struck the table with the back of his claw, the sound sharp like a whip crack. "Then they are nothing more than vermin," he said. "We classify them as harmless. Keep them contained, nothing more." Agreement rippled through the chamber. None of them noticed the small tremor in the intelligence chief's voice, the hesitation before he filed the classification. By the time the fleet's banners were raised and orders sent out, the decision had been sealed. That night, 5 systems went dark. Not through invasion, not through fleets of equal power, but through something far more humiliating. Human raids. Smuggling. Sabotage. Every system crippled by acts so small and improvised that the alien commanders could barely comprehend how they had been outmaneuvered. The reports came in with chaos. Refineries exploded. Outposts burned. Entire garrisons starved because supply depots were turned into glowing wrecks. Somewhere between laughter and outrage, the War Council realized they had made a mistake. Far from the sterile chambers of their empire, a single battered frigate drifted through the wreckage of a burning depot. Captain Laura Briggs sat in the command chair, a streak of oil running down her jaw like war paint. Her ship, the Raven's Call, shook with every small adjustment, its engines older than most of her crew. "You know," Jacob Price muttered from the engineering station, "when I signed up for this, I thought hit and run meant maybe steal some fuel, not blow up an entire bloody star system supply chain." "You're welcome," Owen Grant called from the pilot's seat, grinning through the sweat plastered to his forehead. His hands flew over the controls, guiding the ship between fragments of burning alloy and frozen corpses of enemy fighters. "This is art. You can't rush art." "Art doesn't usually get me killed," Jacob shot back. "Engineering disasters do." Laura let them bicker, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Her heart was hammering harder than she would ever admit, but she kept her tone level. "Status on the cargo holds?" Maria Torres, hunched at the medical console, brushed her dark hair back with a shaky hand. She looked exhausted, eyes shadowed, but her voice was steady. "We pulled 2 crates of rations and a crate of power cells. That's all we could grab before the fire spread." "Good enough," Laura said. She shifted forward in her chair, lowering her voice. "And the prisoners?" Maria hesitated, then met her eyes. 6 alive. 4 barely. They'll need a medbay better than this ship if they're going to survive." Silence held for a beat. Laura felt it sink into her chest like lead. She wanted to promise they could save them, but lies had no place out here. The console beeped, breaking the moment. Owen's grin faltered as he read the incoming scans. Captain. We've got company. 2 patrol ships coming in hot. Looks like they finally noticed their depots missing." Jacob groaned. Of course they did. Because nothing says fun like running from ships twice our size. Laura straightened. The fear was there, gnawing at her ribs, but she smothered it with resolve. "Owen, plot us the fastest course out of here." "Jacob, I need every ounce of power you can squeeze out of those engines." "Maria, keep the prisoners stable, no matter what." "Copy that," Jacob muttered. "If the engines explode, I'll make sure to haunt you." Owen smirked without looking back. "You'd be a lousy ghost. Too whiny." Maria cracked the faintest smile, then returned to her patience. The Raven's Call roared to life, its old engine screaming in protest as it turned toward the void. Behind them, the depot burned brighter, a funeral pyre for the Empire's arrogance. As the patrol ships closed in, Laura leaned back in her chair and whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "Harmless, huh? Let's see how long they keep thinking that." The ship jumped to faster than light, vanishing into the stars, leaving only fire and silence behind. And somewhere, deep in alien space, commanders who had laughed hours before were now staring at their destroyed systems in disbelief, realizing for the first time that humanity was not harmless at all. The alien patrol ships never caught them, but the near miss haunted Laura Briggs for days. Every system they passed through carried the same rumor, whispered in code through smuggler channels and pirate dens. 5 alien outposts gone in a single night. The Empire humiliated by a species they had written off as weak. Humanity had teeth, and suddenly the galaxy was watching. The resistance was no longer scattered, not really. Messages flowed across hidden relays and cracked comm satellites, voices of stubborn survivors stitching themselves together into something bigger. And for the first time since the war began, people dared to say the word hope out loud. Inside the Raven's Call, hope was in short supply. The ship creaked as it settled into a hidden docking ring carved into an asteroid. Owen powered down the engines with a satisfied pat on the console. Still alive. Still flying. You're welcome. You call that flying? Jacob muttered, crawling out from under an access panel, grease smeared across his cheek. Engines are a hair away from tearing themselves in half. One more stunt like the last one and this ship will kill us before the aliens get the chance. Laura ignored their usual bickering and stepped down onto the deck, the weight of command heavy on her shoulders. She could hear Maria coughing softly as she guided the rescued prisoners into the medical bay. Their faces were hollowed by starvation, their skin bruised from restraints. It wasn't victory that she saw in their eyes, only survival. That was the part the resistance never liked to admit. Every win left scars. The crew's respite didn't last. Hours later, they were called to a strategy meeting in the asteroid's hollowed-out chamber. Dozens of resistance captains, commanders, and rogue smugglers crowded the space, their eyes drawn to the man at the center. Commander Ethan Ward. Laura had heard of him before. He was the kind of leader people followed because he never seemed afraid, the kind who threw himself into impossible odds and somehow walked out alive. His presence filled the room, sharp eyes scanning everyone with quick judgment. Our raids worked, Ethan said, pacing in front of the flickering holomap. The Empire's supply chain is fractured. They underestimated us, and we used it. But they're adjusting. They've deployed new patrol groups, reinforced their depots, and started hunting us with ships designed specifically for counterinsurgency. We won't stay lucky forever. The murmurs in the room shifted from satisfaction to unease. So what's your plan? Someone asked. Ethan's mouth curved into the kind of grin that never quite reached his eyes. We stopped playing defense. We hit bigger targets. Shipyards, communication hubs, forward fleets. Make the Empire bleed until they realize we're more than an annoyance. Laura felt her stomach tighten. Bigger targets meant bigger risks. She stepped forward. And how many people do you plan to burn through to make your point? Ethan's gaze flicked to her. You must be Briggs. The one who torched the depot at Arion. Impressive work. That's not an answer, she said, her voice firm. He smirked, tilting his head. War isn't about keeping people safe, Captain. It's about making sure enough of us survive to win. That means sacrifices. If you can't handle that, maybe you're in the wrong fight. Jacob muttered under his breath, I already hate this guy. Owen grinned. He talks like my ex. All promises, no details. Laura didn't smile. Ethan was dangerous, and not just to the enemy. But for now, the resistance seemed willing to follow him. That night, the Raven's Call was assigned to a joint mission, infiltrate an alien listening post orbiting a red dwarf star. The outpost tracked resistance movements across half the sector. If it stayed intact, every human colony would be at risk. The crew prepared in silence. Maria checked her dwindling supplies, knowing she wouldn't have enough to treat everyone if things went bad. Jacob muttered to himself while tightening seals, whispering a prayer he claimed was just engineering habit. Owen hummed a tune, soft and mocking, though his fingers trembled when he thought no one noticed. When Laura finally spoke, her words were simple. We get in, we get out. No one gets left behind. Understood. The infiltration began with quiet precision. Owen guided the frigate through asteroid cover while Jacob rigged a false identification beacon, tricking the alien outpost into thinking they were one of their own supply craft. The deception held just long enough for Laura and a strike team to dock and cut their way inside. The hall stank of chemical disinfectant and alien musk. Laura moved at the front, rifle steady, her breaths measured. Jacob cursed softly in her earpiece as he rerouted the station's alarms. Maria brought up the rear, carrying medkits instead of grenades. They reached the control room in under 20 minutes, but victory never came easy. A squad of alien guards appeared mid-operation, their clawed feet thundering against the floor. The firefight was brutal and short. Humans fought with desperation, ducking behind consoles, firing in bursts, moving too unpredictably for the guards to match. When the smoke cleared, Jacob's voice cracked in her ear. Captain, you need to see this. They followed him down a narrow corridor and into a locked chamber. Inside, dozens of human prisoners were crammed into containment cells, their eyes wide with terror. Maria gasped and rushed forward, hands gripping the bars. They were experimenting on them, Jacob said grimly, pointing at the scars and burn marks across the captive's skin. Testing endurance. Trying to figure out how we fight the way we do. Laura felt her throat tighten. Saving the station's prisoners meant delaying their escape. Staying longer meant more alien reinforcements. Ethan's voice came through the comm, sharp and demanding. Blow the listening post. Forget the prisoners. That's an order. Silence hung heavy. Maria turned, her face pale but fierce. We can't just walk away. Laura made her choice. We're taking them. The battle out was chaos. Reinforcements poured into the corridors, forcing the humans to fight every step back to the dock. Bullets, plasma bursts, screams echoing through steel halls. By the time they reached the Raven's Call, half their strike team was dead, but the prisoners were alive. They escaped into the stars, carrying scars and silence with them. Later, as the ship limped away, Laura stood alone in the cargo bay, staring at the survivors huddled in blankets. She should have felt proud. Instead, she felt the weight of every name she would have to write on a casualty list. And when the next report came through, her blood went cold. The Empire had deployed a new kind of warship, built to hunt humans specifically. And its first destination was the very colony where Maria's family had been taken. The colony was called Hestral Prime, though most of the resistance knew it by another name, the Pit. It was where the Empire sent prisoners to work the ore fields until their bodies broke. Maria Torres's brother was there. Maybe alive. Maybe not. The news hit her like a knife. She didn't speak for hours after the transmission came through, just sat in the medbay sharpening scalpels with unnecessary precision. When she finally looked at Laura, her voice was quiet but steady. We can't leave him. We can't leave any of them. Laura had no answer. Not yet. At the next War Council, Ethan Ward made his stance clear. Hestral is bait. They want us to waste resources on a sentimental rescue. If we go, we lose the bigger war. If we hold back, we bleed them dry somewhere that actually matters. His words made sense. Strategically, Hestral was worthless. But Laura couldn't shake Maria's face, pale and fierce, or the memory of those prisoners in the listening post, broken but alive. In the cramped quarters of the Raven's Call, tension simmered. Jacob hunched over the engine core, muttering like the machinery might answer him back. Owen practiced flight maneuvers with his injured arm still strapped in a sling, refusing to sit still. Maria was a storm contained in silence. Finally, Laura gathered them in the galley. Ethan's right. This mission is reckless. We'll be outnumbered, outgunned, and maybe out of luck. She paused, looking each of them in the eye. But I'm going anyway. No one has to follow me. Jacob barked a humorless laugh. You think I'm going to let you blow my engines up without me there to scream about it? Not a chance. Owen leaned back in his chair, smirking despite the bruise along his jaw. If you're diving headfirst into hell, Captain, someone has to make it look stylish. Maria said nothing, but she stood, her hands trembling, and simply nodded. That was enough. The infiltration began under a blood-red sky. Hestral's surface was scarred with mining pits that glowed faintly from molten rock, the air thick with dust and ash. The Empire's guards patrolled the perimeter with heavy weapons, their armor glinting under the pale sun. Laura led her team through abandoned tunnels beneath the colony, moving with careful precision. Their stolen uniforms scratched at their skin, masks filtering the toxic air. Every step felt like a gamble. Inside the colony, the truth was worse than rumors. The prisoners were skeletal, forced to swing tools until their hands bled, their backs bent under the weight of ore carts. Children carried buckets of water under guard rifles. Maria's face hardened with every sight. Jacob, find us a way to cut the locks, Laura whispered. He knelt by the nearest gate, pulling a set of makeshift tools from his pack. I'll get you away, but it's not going to be quiet. They had minutes, maybe less. By the time the last lock snapped, alarms howled through the camp. Guards swarmed the tunnels, weapons blazing. The firefight was brutal. Laura's rifle bucked against her shoulder, each shot echoing off steel walls. Jacob cursed into the comms, trying to overload power circuits. Owen guided covering fire from a rooftop, shouting insults between bursts. Maria found her brother in the chaos, half-conscious, his face gaunt and gray. She dragged him over her shoulder, refusing to let go. Move! Laura shouted. They fought their way back through the tunnels, prisoners stumbling behind them, guards pressing closer. For a moment, Laura thought they'd never reach the ship. Then a new volley of fire tore through the enemy ranks, clearing a path. Ethan Ward had arrived. His fleet descended like a storm, cannons shredding guard towers, shuttles dropping resistance fighters into the fray. He hadn't abandoned them after all. He had been waiting for the right moment. Together, they forced the Empire off Hestral Prime. For the first time, a human colony was freed. The price was steep. Laura's frigate came out battered, its hull scorched and engines failing. Half the resistance fighters who joined the assault never returned. Owen lay unconscious in the medbay, chest pierced by shrapnel. Maria's brother clung to life, his breath shallow. When the fires died down, Ethan approached Laura on the colony surface. His voice was flat, his expression unreadable. You won. Congratulations. Laura shook her head. We didn't win. We survived. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the comm units crackled with a transmission that froze them both in place. The Empire had declared Earth itself a target. Not a raid, not a skirmish. An extermination. The dread of it spread through every survivor on Hestral like wildfire. Laura looked toward the stars, ash falling across her face, and knew their fight had just changed. The message spread faster than light. Earth was marked for destruction. Not subjugation, not occupation, erasure. For days, every hidden relay and resistance outpost buzzed with chaos. Some said it was a bluff, a scare tactic meant to force humanity's surrender. Others whispered that the Empire wanted revenge for the humiliation at Hestral Prime. Either way, the target was the same. Humanity's home. On the Raven's call, silence hung heavier than the air. Owen lay in the medbay, pale but alive, glaring at the ceiling like he wanted to punch a hole through it. Maria sat at his side, tending to both him and her brother, who was slowly recovering strength but carried scars that would never fade. Jacob buried himself in the engine room, muttering about fuel ratios and patch jobs. Laura stayed on the bridge, staring at the blue sphere of Earth as it grew larger on the display. It didn't look like the heart of a dying species. From orbit, Earth was beautiful, alive with oceans and clouds. But Laura couldn't stop imagining what it would look like burning. The Resistance gathered what forces they could. Old freighters welded with scrap armor. Mining ships refitted with weapons. Smugglers who had once run from the law now flying under the same banner. Earth's governments, fractured and mistrustful for years, reluctantly opened their stockpiles, throwing outdated cruisers and missile silos into the line. It wasn't a fleet. It was desperation given shape. At the War Council in Earth's orbit, Ethan Ward addressed the ragged collection of commanders. His voice carried the same sharp confidence as always, but even he couldn't hide the strain in his eyes. We don't match their numbers. We don't match their firepower. But we do have one thing they don't. We adapt. Every time they've tried to predict us, we've done the opposite. That's why we're still here. That's why they're angry enough to come for our home. Laura stepped forward. She hadn't meant to speak, but the words came anyway. And when they come, we make them pay for every inch. No one fights alone. Not anymore. The silence that followed wasn't fear, it was grim agreement. The attack came 3 days later. The Empire's fleet broke through the atmosphere like a wound in the sky, dozens of warships eclipsing the stars. The largest among them dwarfed entire cities, its hull lined with weapons that burned brighter than suns. On the Raven's call, alarms screamed as Owen, stubborn and still bandaged, dragged himself into the pilot's seat. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead, but his grin was intact. If I'm going to die, I'm doing it with style. Maria grabbed his arm. You should be in bed. Yeah, well, Owen muttered, strapping in, beds don't fly ships. Jacob's voice snapped over comms. Engines are hot. Don't push them too hard or we'll explode before we even see a fight. Exploding would save us the trouble, Owen shot back, fingers tightening on the controls. Laura cut them both off. Focus. We hold until command says otherwise. Every second we buy keeps Earth alive. The first clash was a storm of fire and steel. Human ships darted like insects, weaving between the Empire's massive formations. Missiles launched from the surface, streaking upward in trails of fire. The enemy answered with blinding barrages that shredded dozens of vessels in seconds. Laura's chest ached with every name she heard over comms, ships lost, crews gone. But in the chaos, humanity struck back. Resistance pilots slammed freighters into enemy cruisers, detonating improvised bombs at point-blank range. Jacob rerouted power mid-battle, forcing the Raven's call to surge beyond safe limits to tear through a blockade. Owen whooped like a madman, even as blood dripped from his side. And still, the Empire pressed forward. Maria stood in the medbay, hands soaked in blood that wasn't her own, her voice hoarse from shouting orders to terrified volunteers. She patched, she prayed, she fought to keep her brother alive as the ship shook around her. Hours felt like years. And just when it seemed the Resistance might hold the line, the sky changed. The dreadnought arrived. It slid from hyperspace like a shadow across the sun, its hull stretching across the horizon. Guns larger than towers bristled along its frame, each one capable of erasing a city in a single strike. Its engines flared with the power of a small star. Every comm went silent. Jacob whispered, almost reverent. That's not a ship. That's a planet killer. The dreadnought fired. A lance of light carved across the atmosphere, obliterating a city in seconds. Towers melted, oceans boiled, millions died before their screams could even be sent to orbit. Another shot followed, tearing through a human battleship like it was made of paper. On the bridge of the Raven's call, Laura felt her knees weaken. For the first time since the war began, she wondered if Ethan had been right. Maybe survival was impossible. But when she turned, she saw Maria still working with trembling hands. She saw Owen grinning through pain as he pulled their ship into another dive. She saw Jacob's face pale with fear, but his hands steady on the controls. They hadn't given up. Not yet. Laura drew a breath, forcing her voice steady. We're not done. Not while Earth is still here. Not while we're still breathing. The crew answered her with silence, but it was the silence of agreement. Outside, the dreadnought loomed larger, its weapons charging for another strike. Earth's surface burned. Humanity's fleet was shattering. And Laura realized the fight was about to shift from survival to something far more desperate. The war had grown teeth, and for once the galaxy was bleeding instead of just humanity. What began as 5 stolen systems had spread into something bigger. Every week, another outpost reported a new human strike, another convoy burned, another shipyard dismantled. No one could track how many crews had joined, because they didn't operate under a central flag anymore. They were fire breaking loose in every direction. But fire needs fuel, and fuel runs out. By the 4th month, the Resistance fleet was stretched thin. Supplies were vanishing faster than they could raid them. On one cold stretch of black space, Captain Briggs sat with his officers in the cramped war room, staring at the latest numbers. The air tasted metallic, recycled one too many times. We cannot keep this pace, said Lieutenant Scott, his voice rough from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. We lose ships every raid. We lose people. And the Syndicate will adapt. They always do. Sam leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You're saying quit? After we've finally got them on their heels? Scott slammed his hand on the table. I'm saying victory doesn't mean much if we burn out to ashes before we see it. Catherine rubbed her temples. She had aged in these months, not in years but in weight. The lines on her face were carved deep by every casualty notice she had to sign, every recording she had to send to a family that would never see their child again. We don't win by endurance, she said quietly. We win by ending it. The Syndicate believes humans are scattered, disorganized, nothing more than angry children with sharp sticks. We prove them wrong in one strike. The room stilled. Sam lowered his arms. You're talking about their command node. The command node wasn't just a station. It was a fortress, buried in the storm clouds of Joran 7, shielded by fleets of drones and mercenaries. No sane crew would go near it. But Catherine's eyes carried the kind of calm that came when a person had decided their course, no matter the odds. Briggs finally spoke. If we pull this off, the Syndicate loses control of the sector. They won't just fear us. They'll fear what humans could become if left unchecked. The plan was set. The fleet that launched toward Joran 7 was smaller than any admiral would have dared to command, barely 60 ships. Many were patched together freighters with cannons bolted on, carriers with mismatched fighter wings, vessels crewed by farmers, engineers, and miners who had learned to fight through necessity. But they went anyway. The first wave hit the Syndicate's perimeter like a thunderclap. Explosions lit the gas giant's atmosphere, streaking colors across the storms. Catherine's ship, Resolve, dove through a breach opened by a kamikaze freighter that had rammed a destroyer into fragments. Inside the storm, visibility dropped to nothing. Lightning flared across the hull, static roaring in their ears. Sam's voice cracked through the comms, swearing as half his squadron vanished in the turbulence. Then the command node appeared out of the fog, a massive lattice of steel and energy shields hovering in the gas giant's currents. Its guns turned and began to spit fire. Every ship that survived threw itself into the fight. Drones swarmed like insects, cutting down fighters by the dozen. The Syndicate's defense fleet surged forward, and for a moment it looked hopeless. Then humanity showed what the galaxy had never understood. They adapted. Crews overloaded engines to burn shields hotter than they were ever meant to. Pilots turned collision into a tactic. Every loss was turned into an opening for the next. And Catherine's voice carried steady across the fleet, not with speeches or promises, but with clipped, determined orders that kept chaos from devouring them whole. Target Grid 4. Break their rotation. Scott, get those torpedoes ready. Sam's fighter streaked past the Resolve with its wings on fire. Got you an opening, Cap, don't waste it. The final volley punched through the command node's shields, torpedoes ripping into its reactor core. The explosion cracked the storm apart, a blinding flare that lit the gas giant's clouds for hours. Silence fell across the fleet. What ships remained floated battered and scarred, but alive. The Syndicate's fleets began to scatter, their coordination shattered without central command. Catherine sat in her chair, staring at the ruined station on the display. Her voice was quiet, heavy with exhaustion and the weight of all they had lost. They thought we were harmless. Briggs turned to her. His face was bloodied, his uniform torn. They won't make that mistake again. But beneath the relief was something else. A shadow. Because Catherine knew what came next. The galaxy was watching. The humans had proven themselves far more dangerous than anyone had believed. And if the Syndicate's fall was the beginning, then humanity's rise might not end with freedom, It might end with the whole galaxy realizing they had unleashed something they could never put back in a cage. And far away, on the edges of charted space, other powers were already preparing. The war was only beginning.